Welcome back to the NutriSafe podcast. It's been a while. We ran into some technical difficulties last week. Joey did not have his laptop. We tried doing it from his phone, trying to get at least something out there for y'all. That was not working no matter what we tried. So we were like, hey, I think it's better off if we just wait. So here we are. The last CFP rankings came out Tuesday, so we'll be breaking that down. A massive slate of football games this weekend with some major implications. We're recording this Thursday night. It broke, 10, 15 minutes ago that Alexander Ovechkin broke his left fibula, I think is what it is.
Fibula, I think.
Yeah, that. So he will be out 4 to 6 weeks. As you can tell, I am a massive Caps fan, and that is an absolute bummer to me. He currently leads the league in goals at 15 and is only 27 shy of breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. So I was ecstatic to watch him play over these past couple games, and to watch him go down the other day broke my heart a little bit, and I am praying for a fast recovery. Hopefully he's back by Christmas time and back to scoring because he has been on an absolute tear. I don't know if Joey wanted to plug in anything about that, but
Just prayers to him, and hopefully he'll be back stronger. He'll be Hopefully they'll keep him out a little longer to keep him healthy, because there'll be 40 something games left. If he keeps at this pace, he's gonna break the record this season. I thought he was going to need the year after this year to break it, with the way he played last year. But prayers to him, prayers to Caps fans, because that's some pretty heartbreaking news, especially because the Caps have been playing pretty well. But next man up, this has got to be the mentality for him.
yeah, I think the biggest thing is because the Caps are off to a fiery start. I mean, they have been playing absolutely fantastic all around. I think one of the biggest things has been the goaltending for them. But with Ovechkin gone and that offensive production gone, it will be very interesting to see how they go about this, because this next 4 to 6 weeks is going to go and show us, hey, this is what we're going to look like for the next stage of this franchise as we look kind of past the Alexander Ovechkin era, as he is coming to the end of his career. So it'll be very interesting to see that. I'm going to be very intrigued watching these next couple of games. They play the Avalanche here in 22 minutes. So I've got that pre-recorded. We'll go watch that after we get done with this. But on to some college football. Actually, not even college football. Do you want to go ahead and talk about this big societal event that's been happening?
So NFL, this is great. I love this. NFL decided to find Nick Bosa for wearing a MAGA hat and bombing a post-game interview on Sunday Night Football. And then the week after the election, all you see the last 2 weeks is the little YMCA Trump dance that all these athletes been hitting. Nick Bosa, Brock Bowers, even John Jones hit after his fight and then handed his belt to Trump. I think it's hilarious. And then the NFL came out, I think it was 2 days ago, like Monday, Tuesday, and they said, oh yeah, we're not going to do anything about the Trump dance, but we're going to find Nick Bosa for wearing a MAGA hat. Like, just make it make sense, NFL. Like, stop getting involved in politics. It's stupid. But I think it was a big middle finger to the NFL, which I thought was hilarious. Because what are they going to do? Fine all these players? No. But I thought that was hilarious. Taking it over.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Did what? Fine them? They already said they can't do anything about it.
Anyone. But I mean, it's going beyond even the NFL and the UFC, which we know Trump loves going to the UFC fights. Christian Pulisic, Captain America, coming in for the U.S. men's national team. I don't think it was a U.S. team game though, but after scoring,
it was an MLS game, I think.
Yeah. I think he did do it. I remember I was going through threads because I obviously have to do all that for the podcast, but he did that, and then there was backlash on there, and then people were like, "There's no. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone voicing their political views, especially after an election where you thought, like, I guess a lot of these people thought, hey, you need to kind of keep the political speech down, don't want to have fear of retribution, all that." and then to be able to go and express themselves as they are. I think it's kind of a relief off of their chest, especially as athletes who I will say, I think you can agree with this. 99% of the time will stay out of politics and kind of just leave that to the other people and focus on the game. But I think for the next couple of weeks, you can continue to see the Trump dance on the NFL field. I haven't noticed it in college yet from the games that I've watched. Wouldn't be surprised if someone's done it. I mean, there's 134 FBS teams, so I mean, someone's got to do it at some point. But we'll see how the chips fall there.
I thought it was great. Just NFL just having to eat their words. I know Roger Goodell was sitting in his basement so mad. But and then this broke about 20 minutes ago. Bryce Underwood flips his commitment from LSU to the Wolverines after he trashed the Wolverines on his TikTok page. Thought that was hilarious, but money talks. $10.5 million talks. So, I mean, good for the Wolverines, I guess. But
And
I just thought that was funny that you had to eat your own words.
I have a question for you here. So
Okay.
we're obviously seeing how this season is playing out for Michigan, and we both called it. We both said they were going to be absolute trash this year, which they are. They are a terrible team. They lost all of their offensive and defensive production. They lost their pretty much most of their coaching staff. What other than money, what makes sense with Bryce Underwood going from LSU in the SEC to a Michigan team that I don't think is going to get better next year or the year after? Like how long do you think he
I think
stays
there's
at
going to be
Michigan?
an improvement. I don't think they're going to be fighting for a bowl game next year. I think they're easily going to be at least 8-4. I think they'll have probably a ranked win in there. And what has Brian Kelly done at LSU other than
Nothing.
have good receivers and I mean, you got Jaden Daniels a Heisman, but what has Brian Kelly done that? I mean, Jerome Moore beat Ohio State last year. And the fact that Jerome Moore kept all the entire team together last year, like it was very impressive because I thought a lot of them were going to transfer, but they only had one transfer after Jim Harbaugh left, Jesse Minter left, all the coaching staff, all the star players for the Wolverines left, and I mean it was very impressive. I think Jerome Moore's made some bad coaching decisions in game this year, but I don't think Jerome Moore's deserves like a seat or anything. So I think the Wolverines will get better. They'll probably keep it close with Ohio State this year because it's a rivalry game, even though Ohio State should probably beat them by 30. But it's an improvement from Davis Warren. I mean, it's a huge get for the Wolverines, and money talks. And the transfer portal they got going into last season is the reason they won the national championship. So I don't mind you spending big money on a guy. It's just scary because I gave he's a 5-star, but he's an unproven commodity. That's the biggest worry for him. But if you don't have anything else on that, we're gonna preview the top 5 matchup this week. Which first I want to say it's an absolute crime that this game is not at 7:30. It's a crime this game is not prime time. Every top 5 matchup should be a mandatory prime time kickoff. Every single one. I think Texas and Georgia was, but Ohio State, Penn State should have been one. Oregon, Ohio. I don't remember if Oregon, Ohio State was a 7:30 kickoff, but Oregon, Ohio State. Alabama, Georgia, I think was the top 5 matchup when they played. But any top 5 matchup should automatically be prime time. I don't care that the Big Ten has a contract with Big Noon. It's a crime this game is at 12 o'clock. And I say we protest. But anyways, Ohio State hosts its third top 5 matchup of the year. You got Kirk Cignetti and the Cinderella story of Indiana walking in 2-0 to Columbus. Toughest game that Indiana's played by far. Indiana's what is Indiana? 106 strength of schedule. So they haven't played anyone like this. Their toughest matchup was the Wolverines and Washington, who are both 5-5, I believe. So I want to get your take on what does Indiana have to do to win, or even be
Uh,
in this game in the fourth quarter.
I think they're going to need to weather the storm. Um, Offensively, they put up very similar numbers. They're averaging 453 yards of offense a game to Ohio State's 451. They give up 20 more yards on average per game compared to Ohio State. And so I think the home field advantage, and I mean, you talk about strength of schedule. Ohio State does have a significantly harder strength of schedule, so those numbers might be skewed when you factor that in. But I think the biggest thing is they're going to have to weather that first initial storm. If you come out and you let Ohio State score a touchdown on the first drive, like a 3-4 minute touchdown, I think you're going to be in big trouble. I think you got to make it a long, like a classic Big Ten drive. Make them run the ball down your throat. I think if you let Ohio State start to throw the ball all over you and spread your defense out, I think Indiana's going to lose by 3 touchdowns. I don't know if that environment. I don't know if they're going to be able to get going what they want to get going if they fall behind the ball early. Um, and we look at some of their common opponents and what they've done. They destroyed Indiana, being they destroyed Nebraska. Ohio State struggled with them a little bit, wasn't their greatest showing. But then you look at like Michigan State and Northwestern, they both had very similar games. Northwestern did put up a 24 spot in a losing effort against Indiana, but much different than the only 7 points that Ohio State allowed.
And this is the thing and I don't have it on the record, but I don't think that Indiana has a defense that can stay with Ohio State's playmakers. I just don't. And Ohio State just lost Seth McLaughlin. And that's a huge loss. That offensive line gets a little more beat up than it already was, which is concerning. But I don't know how their corners are gonna like. You can get your corner one on Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Ibuka. Okay, maybe your corner two can hang with the other one out of those two as well. But your corner three is not going to be able to hang with Carnell Tate. And you can't double everybody. You can't play too high the entire game because Ohio State's going to run it right down your throat. The biggest thing for Indiana in this game is, one, they have to beat Ohio State in red zone efficiency. Ohio State is, I think they're top 5 in the country on both sides of the ball in red zone efficiency. So, especially their defense. And so, the biggest thing in this game for Indiana to be walking in the fourth quarter with it being a 1-score game is, can you force field goals instead of giving up touchdowns? Because that's what Ohio State's done a lot of this year. They'll let you drive, especially in the first half. They'll let you drive all the way down to the 30, their 30, and then you're going to have to kick a field goal. And then Ohio State just gets their offense going. So red zone efficiency is going to be huge. Can Indiana run the ball and keep the ball out of Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith and Quinshon Junkins and Travion Henderson's hands? I don't think they can. I think the interior defensive line is going to be huge for Ohio State in this game. I think they're going to have they're going to have big days. And if I'm Ohio State, I'm not going to be. The biggest concern for me as an Ohio State fan is, can we get pressure rushing for? I don't think it's a very high chance that Ohio State loses, but can Ohio State get pressure rushing for? Because Curtis Rourke's proven that he can throw the ball around the yard. But can he do that under, I guess, the bright lights? But that's all I got. The odds are stacked against Indiana. We'll just say that.
Okay, I have a couple of questions for you coming down to this.
Go
So
ahead.
I was on Instagram the other day and I saw a clip from the Pardon My Take podcast. And they were talking about, hey, Indiana, they're 5 in the CFP ranking, 6. They were like, hey, if they win, they're like 96% chance of getting in. If they lose, 95%, which I don't necessarily know where they got that 95% chance from, but they were like, hey, if that's the case, should they sit Curtis Rourke, seeing what happened with Florida State and Jordan Travis last year? Should they sit him and try and play the game with their backup?
So here's the thing: is if you don't start Curtis Rourke, what if you get blown out by 40? Then what? Because if I'm the committee, I'm not putting Indiana in when their only ranked matchup this year was. I might. It depends how the rest of the league shapes out. The rest of the college football shapes out. But I'm taking a 10-2 Georgia over 11-1 Indiana that lost to Ohio State by 40 or even 30 or whatever. If Indiana gets blown out by 4 scores, so I think that was stupid. Joey Galloway said it too. But even then, so say you lose to Ohio, say you do sit him. You don't have that chemistry when you go play these big boys. Ohio State, like, per se, Indiana loses. They get, I don't know, the 10 seed. As of right now, they would be playing Alabama. You're not beating Alabama when your quarterback hasn't gotten those reps under the bright lights because you're going to go play in Tuscaloosa. So you're going to make sure Curtis Rourke is unbattle tested and just to protect him. And either way, Florida State got left out because the committee is going to, and we'll talk about this later, the committee is going to do whatever the hell it wants. Like, there's no metrics for this. So if the committee wants to put 7 SEC teams in there, it's going to put 7 SEC teams in there, and no one can say anything about it. If the committee wants to put 5 Big Ten teams in there, even like per se they put 8-4 Illinois in there, they're going to do it, and no one's going to say anything about it. Like, we're all going to complain, but we're still going to watch it, and it's still going to make a lot of money. So the committee thinks it can do whatever the hell it wants. So I don't. So you're not going to put your starting quarterback in the biggest game of the year, and then you're going to have to go play Alabama or even any SEC team at their place. You're just setting yourself up for failure. At least you have a fighting chance with Curtis Rourke. And Jordan Travis got injured against like an FCS team last year. So I don't really get that point. I've heard that argument multiple times the last couple of days, and it doesn't click in my head on why anyone would think that's a good idea.
Okay, and so kind of piggybacking off of that last one, if Indiana, let's say they go in, the spread's currently, I believe it was 12.5 when I was looking here a couple hours ago. Spread's currently 12.5. Let's say Ohio State covers, they win by 18, 21 points. Do you think in 11-1 Indiana with, what was it, 103rd, 106th strength schedule, their only ranked matchup being Ohio State, losing by 3 scores, should be put in the playoff ahead of a team like Georgia, like Tennessee, like Ole Miss, with that record and that kind of repertoire?
So, one, Georgia Tech's no walk in the park for Georgia. Alabama or Auburn's not going to be a walk in the park for Auburn's not going to be a walk in the park for Alabama. So there's Notre Dame still has to play Army. If they lose to Army, they're out. So there's a lot of things that can still happen. But the strength of net schedule numbers I pulled are only the strength of schedule that they've played up to this year. And these are the rankings that the committee pulled out. So these are the metrics the committee used. I'm going to talk about this later. Metrics the committee used, and they don't tell you how they got those numbers, or they don't tell you how they got those numbers. They won't tell you who it is. It's just some analytics company. They won't tell you what they used, how they got to this strength of schedule, nothing. So these strength of schedule ratings are very vague, just as a disclaimer when we go over these later. But so Indiana's strength of schedule rating is probably going to go up a little bit, probably like to the 80s. But it's a lot that happens. I still think Indiana's a really good football team, and I think Indiana's going to be able to score against a lot of teams in the playoffs. I think they're going to be able to score against Alabama. I think they'll probably score against Georgia if they can force a couple of turnovers. I think if they played Notre Dame today, it would be a good game. If they played Tennessee, it would probably be a good game. Miami, there would be fireworks in that game. So Boise State, it would make it for a very interesting matchup. So I don't think Indiana is like a Cincinnati from when we had a 14 playoff. So they had like a Cinderella run and then they lost to number two. But I don't know. I still think they're pretty much in as of right now.
Okay. I personally think if they lose by 3 scores, I think they're going to get bumped. I think they need to drop down to like 13, 14. They'll be one of the first teams out. And Josh Pate, I don't know if you watched the Pate show. He was, or the Pate Free, I don't know what they call it. He was one of the ones that said it best because this is like their one shot. Like this is almost like a playoff game for them. This is kind of win or go home. But you're starting basically with a 15-point lead per se. Um, but I think if they get blown out, your only true game, you lose by 2, 3 scores. I don't think that's saying like, hey, oh, we're a top 10 team. They're a maybe top 15, top 20 team. But kind of moving on from that, how much of an advantage do you think that Ohio State is going to have with the home field advantage?
I think it's going to be massive. I think the only concern that I even have a little bit for Ohio State is that if they're looking to the game the next week, Thanksgiving weekend, which you shouldn't because it's a football game and it's a top five game, and so it. I think Ohio State's going to have a huge advantage playing at home. It helps just like it helped Ohio State out when they played Penn State. I think it's going to help Indiana out when they don't have to play Ohio State under the bright lights. So I think that gives a little bit of an advantage to Indiana, but I still think that like I don't think I don't remember hearing a lot of Curtis Rourke's name before this year. So this is his first true battle test, and especially in an environment like Ohio Stadium. The place is probably going to be the toughest environment he's ever played in for a top five matchup, and it pretty much determines whether Ohio State gets the Big Ten championship or not. And you know Ohio State wants to be rolling in with that momentum when they go play the Wolverines, and they need that momentum when they go play Oregon in the Big Ten championship if they win out. So I think being at home is a huge advantage for Ohio State.
And lastly, if say Ohio State loses this weekend and loses to Michigan, and we hear about, hey, there's a possibility like, oh, a 3-loss SEC team, and we'll get to that with South Carolina here in a little bit. Is there a chance a 3-loss Ohio State can squeak into the playoff if they lose to Indiana and to Michigan State or Michigan?
It depends if they're still in the Big Ten championship, so they can if they go 10-3, yes. They're Big Ten champions. Obviously, they're still going to get in. If they can squeak into the conference championship, because Penn State still has to go to Minnesota and play. Playing in Minnesota is not a walk in the park either. That'll be an interesting game. But my biggest thing is I think Ohio State is probably the most talented team on paper in the country. Maybe behind Oregon, because Oregon's been insanely good this year, even though they got scared last week against Wisconsin. I think Oregon's one of the. I think the strength of schedule is going to help them out because I think Ohio State's strength of schedule is going to get boosted by whatever metrics the committee used. I think that's going to get pushed up when they play Indiana, and I'll probably stay neutral after they play the Wolverines. But as unbiased as I say, I still think they get in. Now, if they lose to Oregon in the conference championship and they end up 4 losses, I think they probably get left out at that point.
I think it'd be very interesting, and we'd have to see kind of where everything. I think if a 3-loss Ohio State would need um, a lot of help as well to get in. I think there's going to need to be some chaos in which I think no matter what ends up happening, we are going to see chaos play out over these next 2-3 weeks with the conference championships coming in there at the end. But moving on,
Well,
Oh, did you have something else?
I don't think there's a chance in hell that happens, though.
Oh yeah, no, I
Just
mean
as
it's
a
like
disclaimer,
I
I think Ohio State covers this weekend. I think they probably win by 3 scores.
as a South Carolina fan, that is what I'm rooting for. That is probably what I will bet on. But we got to play devil's advocate here. We got to talk about the what ifs. I love
Well,
me a
now
good
you
what
spoke it
if.
into existence, so it's probably going to happen.
If I spoke the Michigan loss into existence in was it 5 years in a row? If you guys lose this year,
4.
4.
It would be 4 this year.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
ESPN's
there
giving
will
them
be
a
hell to pay. I'm driving down to South Carolina and we're throwing hands at that point. I'm gonna
I
speak the
mean, dude,
Wofford loss into existence.
that will break my heart and a TV somewhere. But um, moving down south to the Bayou and Death Valley, Ole Miss coming into town to play LSU. I
Ole
think
Miss
this is
played
going to be
LSU last week, bud. Florida.
Florida. I don't know how I wrote that down wrong. I wrote that down as Ole Miss versus LSU.
Oh, that was great.
They're
I
still
heard you say
still.
Bayou. I was like, hold up, no chance.
Ole Miss did not. Who did Ole Miss play last weekend? I
Georgia,
don't know.
wasn't
I
it?
can't remember. I think it was 2 weekends ago. They may have had a bye last weekend.
They
No, it
might
was.
have.
No, it was Georgia. They played Georgia at Georgia. They're coming into Florida, the swamp, after not surviving the Bayou. Um, I think this is a must-win for Ole Miss. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be a team that's going to get into the playoff with 3 losses.
No, Ole Miss has bad losses, like the loss to Kentucky,
Yeah, and Kentucky now being like a
4-6, I believe.
yeah, they're either a 3 or 4 win team. But I mean, especially for Kentucky being as high as they were at the start of the season, that fall off needs to be studied. But with Ole Miss's losses, I think they're one, I guess 2 good wins if you count that South Carolina win and what South Carolina has panned out to be. The win over South Carolina, very decisive. The win over Georgia, that was a 2-score win. I don't know if that will be enough to propel them as a 3-loss team. And what we've seen previously with the committee I'd say they have a pretty big recency bias. Hey, what have you done in late October and November? And I don't know if a loss to a 5-5 Florida team is going to get them in to the playoff, even though they still have a cupcake in Mississippi State the week after.
I don't think Ole Miss gets in either if they lose. And DJ Lagway is legit. Like, I think DJ Lagway is a Heisman contender in at least a year or two. Ole Miss's back's against the wall, so I think they're going to come out swinging in this game against Florida. I don't think Ole Miss, even if there's a chance they were going to look over Florida, they're not going to look over them with the way Florida played against LSU last week, and they smacked LSU around. That was a bad game for LSU. But DJ Lagway, like, he kind of won that game against LSU in the pocket, which was the biggest thing for me. He's not running around creating all these type of plays like Alabama uses Jalen Moreau. So my keys for Florida is DJ Lagway is going to have to hit these throws in the pocket. He's going to have to hit the mid-range and the short, the slants. He's got to hit those guys. And then defense will have to stop the run and keep them off schedule, force them into 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. 3rd and 6. If they can do that, they have a very good chance to win this game, especially with it being at home. And Florida's hasn't been as bad as we thought they would. We thought Florida was only going to be what, a 3-4 win team, and
And
Florida's
with it
actually ended up playing really well this year, especially with
come
all their injuries.
coming into the season, I think they had one of the hardest strength of schedules. So looking at who everyone they've had to play, and you look at that Texas game a couple weeks ago. I put zero weight on that game, speaking of the fact that hey, Lagway was out, he was hurt. You look at the Georgia game. That game in the first half versus second half when Lagway was out, completely different game. I think Lagway stays in versus Georgia. Florida beats Georgia there. We don't know what would have happened if Lagway played against Texas. That game was a complete blowout. But I mean,
But those
I
Florida players were fighting. Those
yes,
guys were fighting for Billy. I think that's why Billy's saying those kids were fighting for Billy, and I think that's a huge thing for the Florida program, especially with the state they're in. And what a win this would be for Billy if he could pull this one out.
and then having Florida State. I mean, that's a free win right there. So you have the chance to come into this year being projected, hey, 3-4 wins is awesome. To now going, hey, there's a chance we finish the regular season at 7-5. And I think that you talk about Ole Miss needing to come out swinging. I think if Florida punches Ole Miss in the mouth first, Ole Miss isn't going to know what to do. I don't think,
Well,
and you
Ole
talk
Miss has
about,
had some maturity problems this year too. They did not play well at all against Kentucky. They've had a problem with taking their opponents seriously.
and
And
I
you
mean,
see
you talk
when
about the
Florida
swamp.
does, you're playing at the Swamp. Like, granted, it is a 12 o'clock kickoff, which also plays an advantage to Ole Miss. If it was the Swamp at 7:30, it would probably be a problem. But I still, it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna be. I think this game's probably going to be a one-score game.
Do you think and I don't know if you bet on this one. No, you didn't.
Which game?
Um,
The Ole Miss
oh yeah, you did. You
Florida
took
game?
the under. I was gonna say I think the under is a great bet here. I mean, you look at what the score of that Florida LSU game. I think it's going to be a very similar situation to that.
I think so too. Ole Miss is more of a defensive team. They don't have to score 50 points to win big games this year. Ole Miss's identity is a lot more defensive. I think I think both defensive lines will dominate this game. I think I would be very worried about Ole Miss's offensive line against Florida's defensive line. And if DJ Lagway can stay in the pocket and just fire them away, it's going to create some problems for Ole Miss if they can't get there.
So that's all I've got for that game. And I think the were you good with that?
Yep.
Good, moving on. So I think this might be the most underrated game this weekend. Out in Tempe, Arizona, with BYU versus Arizona State. Arizona State, the turnaround they've had this year after going 3-9. Yeah, they were 3-9 last year. The program was in the gutter. To be 8-2 with a chance to kind of end BYU's playoff hopes. I mean, kudos to the coaching staff. That is unbelievable. But getting down to the actual meat of this game, I think BYU is one of the most overrated teams in the country.
So my thing with that is I thought Vegas was very much underrating BYU the couple of weeks that they were underdogs at home, and BYU had played well. The last 2 weeks, their offense has looked atrocious, and turning the ball over, just bad play calling. Red Sox not hitting the throws he needs to. They got exposed against Kansas last week, and kudos to Kansas. We're going to talk about them here in a minute. Kudos to Kansas. They've played really well the last 3 weeks to be able to fight in these this tough little stretch of schedule. But BYU, they've got to fix their red zone efficiency. They were 2 of 4 last week in the red zone with no touchdown score. They have to fix that. You cannot go 4 drives in the red zone and not score a touchdown. You're going to lose. That is a recipe for disaster. I don't care if Alabama is playing Rutgers. If they go 0 for 4 in the red zone, they're probably going to lose. Especially when you're turning the ball over. And so this game for the Big 12 title, Big 12 title spot, probably with a date with Colorado. So I think but I don't know where you go if you're BYU because you look bad. Arizona State's been playing well. They lost to Texas Tech, and I forget the other team they lost to. I think it was Kansas State. So you have 2 good losses. I mean, Texas Tech isn't ranked right now, but Texas Tech is not a terrible football team either. So
Arizona State has losses to Cincinnati, and Texas Tech, they just beat Kansas State last weekend on the road in Kansas State.
That's right, because Arizona State got out to like 24-0 lead. So,
but I mean, Arizona State, I think, is one of the best, I guess, schedules behind them. Kind of coming. If they can beat BYU this weekend, that would be ranked wins over Utah, Kansas State, and BYU.
Utah's not ranked right now.
But okay, this is something that needs to be talked about. If, let's say, for example, for South Carolina, if South Carolina beat LSU at the start of the year, and now LSU is unranked now, do you still count that as a ranked win?
If I'm putting, it's kind of a hard topic because if you, it's a hard topic because there's so many ebbs and flows in the season, like so many ups and downs. The season's basically a roller coaster. Some teams fall apart. Some teams end up flourishing at the end of the year, kind of like how Kansas had. And so, but Utah, we found out, not a very good football team, especially without Cam Rising. I think they're on QB3 right now, but I don't think Utah is a very good football team. So it's hard to say that, yeah, they've got a ranked win over Utah, but I don't even think Utah, even if they won out, would even be in consideration for the top 25. I think Utah's 5-5 right now.
I am a very firm believer, like, hey, if you beat a team and they were ranked, no matter what they do kind of further down the line, that counts as a ranked win. Unless it's week 1, I think preseason rankings are, I don't want to say not the most accurate, but they are kind of can be way off, as we saw Florida State being a top 10 team and then being 1-9 right now. So I think that you have to say, like, okay, if I beat, for instance, South Carolina, beat number 23 Missouri, although they didn't move in the CFP rankings. If Missouri had fallen out and we were the reason they had fallen out, that should still count as a ranked win because they are no longer ranked because of us.
Well, I think that's the one exception. I think that could be the one exception. If a team falls out of the rankings because of you, we could consider that an exception. But if you beat number 8, say how Georgia beat Clemson week 1, and then Clemson ended up actually falling apart again this season and fell out of the rankings. Say Clemson has 4 losses right now. I don't think that should count as a ranked win because Clemson ended up not being a good football team. They had 4 losses.
That's where I go to say, hey, don't I think they should look at this. Don't preseason ranked teams so you have like an idea, but don't put a number next to the name until after week 1.
Even then, I still don't think you know after week 1. I don't think you know until week 4. And even then, you still really don't know until conference plays in full swing.
Well, even
you
for
start having a really good idea of who's going to win the Natty by like week 6. I don't think you really have a great idea because before the season we thought Georgia was the best team in the country. Granted, Georgia has the toughest, according to CFP, Georgia has the hardest schedule in college football, but they haven't looked good. That's where the eye test comes in. But Georgia hasn't looked tremendous. I mean, the Wolverines I think they were a top 15 team going into the year, and they're 5-5 right now.
But
And they had just won the Natty the year before.
we said here though, we were like, hey, Michigan is not a top 15 or even 25 team after what they lost. That was something I think that there was a lot of recency bias on.
Well, I think the preseason rankings should be the final rankings of the year before.
I would agree with that. Although I would say kind of where that differs is, hey, if
We have a Wolverines and Washington situation from this year, where both teams are 5-5 right now.
that, or you go and you bring in a really good transfer class or have a really good high school class that's looking like they're going to make a difference, then hey, maybe I, I'm just going to use this
I
as an
don't even
example.
think you should mess with the rankings. I think the initial rankings should come out after week 1. And even then, you still don't know. I don't know how good Ohio State is or Alabama is after they go beat up on some like nobody school in the American. Like you don't know. And most years when a team goes beat up on Army and Navy or week 1, like you just don't know. Like cool, they suck a triple option, but still, I can't really tell if you're a good football team.
Fair. Moving on to Colorado and Kansas. Do you think this is a trap game for Colorado?
Yes and no. Where is this game at? Do you have
It's
that
in
pulled up?
Kansas. It is in Kansas.
I don't. So I think it is a trap game, but I still think Colorado's going to win. I think Colorado's probably going to win by 2 scores. I love this magical run Kansas on. I would love to see them knock off Colorado just to make the Big 12 more chaotic because Colorado clinches the Big 12 championship if they win this weekend. If you're Kansas, you have to run the ball. With Jaden Daniels, make it 11. Jalen Daniels, keep it 11 on 11. You got to keep the ball out of Shedeur Sanders' hands because their offense is much better than your defense. And your offense is, and Kansas's offense is probably better than Colorado's defense. Even though Colorado's improved vastly on defense from where they were last year. But like Colorado's going to score, and you'll see this in my bets this weekend. Colorado's going to score. I think they're going to they could put up 49 on Utah. And granted, I know Utah turned the ball over like 5 times last week. But if Colorado's putting up 49 on Utah and Utah still has a really good defense, what are they going to do to Kansas, who already has 6 losses? They're fighting for a bowl game right now. That's what concerns me. I think the streak ends this week. It was great for Lance Leipold to get that streak going and get a little bit of momentum going, but I think it ends here. I think Kansas puts up a fight. I just think Colorado is going to be able to outscore them, no matter how much Kansas scores.
I think the big thing for Kansas, you talked about getting to run the ball. I think kind of coincides with that. But if they want to win, they need to win the turnover battle and then win the time of possession. I think if you win that, and that goes for most games, I don't think there's any reason you shouldn't win.
Colorado's got that big playability, and I really don't think Kansas secondary can keep up with those guys they got out wide, like in Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn and all the other guys they got out there. That's what scares me. I think Colorado could lose the time of possession by 5-10 minutes and still win this game.
That's also where the
As
turnover
long as
battle
Shedeur
comes in.
Sanders isn't holding on to the ball too long and taking sacks and isn't throwing interceptions.
But I think that you talk about the interception, I think that'll be a big part. But then Um, the battle out wide between Travis Hunter and Kobe Bryant will be very entertaining. I think it'll be not must-see TV, but it'll be um, fun to watch TV for sure. I think Travis Hunter playing another 140 snaps this week is also it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially how we get into the playoffs where he's going to be playing 140 snaps against, let's say, Georgia or Alabama or someone from the SEC who is going to just absolutely like out physical Colorado.
I don't think there's a chance that he's going to be able to survive 140 stops against Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon. I don't think there's a chance in hell that he can survive that.
I mean,
There's no
that's
way. Because
unbelievable.
that's the closest to the NFL you're going to get before you go to the NFL this year. Because those are almost NFL defenses. There's literally no chance that he ends up playing 140 snaps in the CFP. That would be doing wrong to him. Because he will get broken. They will break him.
So, being a South Carolina fan, I am still holding on to hope. I know we talked about this beforehand. There is a chance. Small, but it's there. Yeah, I think I didn't come up with this list. One of the Gamecock fan pages came up with it. Makes a lot of sense. I will say I think it does. It holds a lot of water. South Carolina, if they want to make a playoff, first off, has to win out. If they can go out and beat Clemson in fake Death Valley by 15, 20 points, even better. Win versus Clemson needed none the least. But they would need Indiana to get blown out by 5 of the 8 following scenarios need to happen. Indiana needs to get blown out by Ohio State. Ole Miss to lose to either Florida or Mississippi State. I don't think Ole Miss is losing to Mississippi State, so this weekend in the swamp was going to be huge. Notre Dame to lose to either Army or SoCal. I think if Notre Dame loses to Army, Army is going to possibly get an at-large bid.
If they win their conference, yes.
Georgia to lose to Georgia Tech, Tennessee to lose to Vandy, A&M to lose to Texas, and then SMU to lose SMU or Miami to lose a regular season game and the ACC championship game, and then BYU a blowout loss to Arizona State and a loss in the Big 12 championship. 5 of the 8. I think the 5 most likely would be the Indiana losing in a blowout fashion to Ohio State, A&M losing to Texas, the SMU or Miami to lose a regular season game, and then the ACC championship game. I think SMU could lose at Virginia this week. I think that is a very real possibility. And then I would think that Miami would win the ACC. I also think BYU is on major alert this weekend. I'll have all those. It's not an upset, but that'll be probably an upset alert game just because they're ranked higher than Arizona State. And then lastly, I think Ole Miss is going to lose to Florida this weekend. So those are the 5 I think will happen. Of course, we'll see what the CFP kind of does with the rankings. But
So
I
do have a question. So, granted, they got Colorado at 16, BYU at 14. So how does BYU only need to lose? Because
they would need
I
to
guess if
lose
you're willing to hold it,
they would need to lose to Arizona State and then in the Big 12 championship game. So that would mean Colorado would take the Big 12 championship spot.
yeah, but even then, I think only one team from the Big 12 is getting in. I think
That
only
would
the
be
champions getting in. I don't think there's a chance that the Big 12 gets 2 teams in.
yeah. That's what I'm saying is Colorado is going from the Big 12. BYU loses to Arizona State and then in the Big 12 championship, BYU's not going.
Or BYU could just win out. If BYU wins out, that takes up the Big 12 slot. You see what I'm saying?
But
Because if they play Colorado in the Big 12 championship, then, or if Colorado loses this week or next week, then BYU is just taking that spot. The only way that, because Big 12 champion's going to get a bid, conference champion bid. There's no chance it doesn't. Unless somehow Army beats Notre Dame this week, which I don't think there's a chance that's happening. But that's the only thing that got me. Because I would almost want BYU to win out. I would rather there not be a logjam. Because if you have 10-2 teams, or 11-2 teams per se, like that's the worst case scenario for South Carolina fans.
so
I'd almost be rooting for BYU this weekend. Me personally.
let's say BYU does win out, takes the 12 seed as the latest playoff bracket would suggest, and then because they would be the lowest ranked conference champion. If they do win out and the bracket stays exactly the same, it likely will not, but if it stays exactly the same, BYU's first game would be in the shoe against Ohio State. BYU is going to get the ever living shit kicked out of them.
How much more of a chance do you think? I don't know how much more of a chance South Carolina has against Ohio State either.
I think that would be a hell of a lot closer than BYU and Ohio State.
Don't get me wrong, but there's not really any real metrics here. Like we have some metrics, but there's not really any real metrics here.
And I think if South Carolina was going to get in, it was going to be the 11th
But either
seed.
way, the Big 12 is still getting in. Like the Big 12 is getting in no matter what.
Yes, and they're going to take that 12 seed spot, assuming that Boise State wins their conference.
Yeah.
So,
but it doesn't matter. Like even you would almost be rooting for either BYU to lose 2 games and then Colorado to lose a game. Either way, the Big 12 is going to need a champion, and so I don't think the Big 12 really affects
the Big
you.
12 is getting a champion in. I'm saying that it would be nicer, I think, if Colorado got in than BYU, although I don't think it matters. Just one of them. Just someone needs to lose. If Colorado loses to Kansas, that's nice, but then they would need to lose the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, I would rather not have
two
10-2 teams going into the conference championship.
It would need to be either BYU wins out and wins the conference championship, or Colorado wins out and wins the conference championship. I don't think one of them can suffer a loss and then win the conference championship. I think that's going to cut Carolina's probability out. But then again, I think it's only going to be one Big 12 team, regardless. But then I think
unless Tennessee loses to Vandy, Ole Miss loses this weekend, unless chaos happens in the SEC, because certain SEC teams can't lose. Because if Texas A&M loses Texas, they're out.
Which I think is very much going to happen.
If Ole Miss loses to Florida, they're likely out. If Tennessee loses to Vandy, they could be out. I think if Bama loses, they can still sneak in. I think if Georgia loses, they'll still be in.
That's what I'm saying with this. But looking at the current bracket, if South Carolina was to get in, it would be the 11th seed. With that, under the current bracket, they would play Penn State. I think South Carolina beats Penn State in Happy Valley.
I don't know. I don't think South Carolina's got the guys up front to beat Penn State up.
On defense?
On both sides of the ball.
South Carolina has the best defensive
really
line
good
in the
offensive
country.
Line.
I think South Carolina has the best front 7 in college football.
I'm willing to say top 5, but I don't know the best.
Even the DBs, I think, will be able to keep Penn State in check. This is the same Penn State team that beat Bowling Green by 7 at home. You're telling me that same team is going to beat South Carolina?
Okay, but we're also talking about the same team that gave up 36 points to a mediocre LSU team. And lost to Ole Miss 28-3?
27-3. Also, we didn't have a quarterback in the second half. Very questionable officiating the entire game.
I mean, that's fine. That's all good and well. But,
So
I mean, if we're going to
I'm
talk about
so,
the beginning of the year, let's talk about the beginning of the year. This is the same South Carolina team that only beat Old Dominion by 4.
very much so. But it's also the same South Carolina team that lost to Alabama by 2.
This is the same. I mean, yeah, Penn State also only has 1 loss.
Penn State also
Penn
has a
State's beating a
very
ranked team in Illinois. And I'm sorry, Happy Valley is not a place I want to play in the playoffs. Because it's probably going to be at least a 3:30 kick. I do not want to play in Happy Valley if I'm South Carolina. Now, granted, if I'm Penn State, I don't want to play South Carolina either. But I definitely don't want to go to Happy Valley when it's cold in freaking December. It could be snowing. I don't want to go all the way up to Pennsylvania if I'm a Southeastern Conference team. I think one of the biggest things is when you have these SEC and Big Ten matchups. I think one of the biggest things you're going to see is the weather in the Big Ten is going to play a huge part for these Big Ten teams if they host at home. Like for Boise State, it wouldn't affect them as much if they played Ohio State. But you have South Carolina traveling up to Happy Valley and at the end of December, it's South Carolina is going to struggle. The air is a lot thinner. The ball comes out of your hand differently. It's a lot. You have to play the game just a little bit different. That throws everything off just that much than it does in South Carolina, where it's still 50 degrees up there. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania is getting snow right now.
So my biggest question, and you see this a lot with the teams that will go and play overseas or travel cross country. That's more for the NFL. But for something where it's like the college football playoff, do you think they would go there 4 or 5 days in advance to practice under those conditions? Try and get used to assimilate to that as best as possible.
So when Utah and Florida had that home and home. You remember all the Utah players throwing up because it was so humid in Florida. Then the next and Florida ends up banking Utah that game. Then the next year Florida goes to Utah. I think it was last year, and they couldn't breathe. Like your body has to take like 9 months to adjust to that altitude. So I don't know how much of you get used to like breathing hard and dealing with the thin air, but I still don't know how much of an advantage that would play or how much that would help you. I still think that game was where Penn State's used to it. They're fine going out with no sleeves on. South Carolina's going to be frigid when it's 22 degrees outside.
I think for sure.
I think that's a huge phenomenon that we just don't know about yet because all the playoff games are played in the South. Now we're going to have these. I think if Boise State somehow gets a game at home during the college football playoff, if an SEC team plays them, it's going to be closer than you think. I still think the SEC team would win if they go into Boise, but the air is completely different.
I also think Boise's defense, as of late, has not been the same defense they had against Oregon.
I'm not saying that an SEC team won't still beat them by 2 scores, but I think the SEC team is going to struggle in the first half, going down that rabbit hole because of the elevation. So I think if Boise State were to come down to an SEC team in August, they would probably get their asses kicked.
Fair. You want to go ahead and get to weekend picks so we can wrap this up?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the CFP rankings, but
we can squeeze that in next week after the next ones come out. I'm sure there will be a lot more.
Yeah, right before rivalry week. Should we do a rivalry week extravaganza? Just like talk about all the juicy goodness about Clemson and South Carolina, Auburn, Alabama, the game, Texas A&M and Texas, which is going to be electric. College Station Kyle Field is going to be, that atmosphere is going to be insane. I think it's going to be a 7:30 kickoff too. Insane. Anyways, you want to go with your best bets?
Yes. So I've got Arizona State money line at home against BYU. Ohio State to cover 12.5 against Indiana. Nebraska money line versus Wisconsin. Texas Tech to cover minus 3.5 at Oklahoma State, who has been one of the biggest disappointments this year. And then Pitt to cover plus 8.5 at Louisville. That'll be another fun one to watch this weekend.
All right. Hold on, I'm pulling them up. So I got Ole Miss and Florida under 55.5. I got Notre Dame minus 14.5 against Army. I don't think Army is going to be able to hang with Navy in this game. Texas A&M money line against Auburn. Losing my mind over here. And then Colorado over 30 points. Colorado TTP over 30 points. And then who is Alabama minus 13.5 over Oklahoma. And then as a bonus, at Syracuse minus 9.5 against UConn. I thought that was a point down. I think, and I mean, I think Auburn might get blown out by. I don't think it would be crazy. I know it's in Jordan-Hare, but I don't think it would be crazy to take Texas A&M minus 6.5. Which that's some good little plus money for you. I don't think it would be crazy. Auburn.
They are.
Well, let's somehow find a way to keep it close against Bama.
Yeah, that'll also be a fun game. Rivalry week is also always amazing, just because it just, not to use the SEC motto here, but it just means more. I mean, if we went last year, if we had gone 3-9 or 4-8 but beat Clemson, it would be completely different than going 5-7 and losing to Clemson. So that's definitely a feeling you want to be able to walk away with, have that good taste in your mouth at the end of the season. Caps just scored. Offense is still working without Ovi.
Sorry, the Red Wings need to fire Steve Yzerman and Derek Wilon.
It's funny how we're saying that now after we're calling Yzerman like a genius for bringing in Patrick Kane a couple years ago.
I mean, that's all good and well, but how did you put that product on the ice and think, oh yeah, this is going to get us to the playoffs? After you ran it back the same way last year, except signed like 2 more crappy contracts. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, but there's some free bonus hockey content for y'all. We will see y'all next week at some point. Don't know when it will be. It'll likely be a long episode due to the bonus rivalry edition. Plenty of great games on next weekend. Enjoy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holiday. My favorite holiday: family, football, and food. The 3 Fs. Fantastic.
Damn
Or that
right.
4th one. Family, football, food, fantastic. So we will see y'all next week. Have a good one. Peace. Stay safe. Enjoy the football games this weekend.